heard what Mr. Streeting said about developing our own industrial base and jobs and all that sort of thing. That is absolutely laudable. The problem is it's going to take a long, long time to get kit made in novel ways that haven't even been thought of potentially in Britain into the hands of soldiers, sailors and airmen. And I'm not certain that if you hear the rhetoric on what Russia might be doing, I don't necessarily accept it in 3 to 5 years' time. I'm afraid we have time to do that. So again, there's a balance to be struck.
Well, in his first outing as Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting said his aim was to make the UK a strong, dependable ally and supporting jobs at home. Here he is speaking on his first day in the job.
My responsibility as the Secretary of State for Defence is to maximise our deterrence and also to ensure that should deterrence fail, we have the capability to fight and to win. But defence is also a great opportunity for our country to realise the Prime Minister's ambition of reindustrialisation, to create good, well-paid jobs and opportunities for the next generation right throughout our country and to broaden the UK's industrial base.
The new Defence Secretary there was Streeting, and of course we have John Healey, now the new Chancellor in number 11 Downing Street. Let's talk to Field Marshal Lord Richards, David Richards, the former Chief of the Defence Staff. Hello to you, Lord Richards.
Hello, John.
It's great to have you with us on the programme. Are you feeling very hopeful about Britain's defences now you've got John Healey at the Treasury and Wes Streeting in the Defence Department?
Yeah, I think I'd reflect opinion across the sort of armed forces for what it's worth, that people are more optimistic. I think mainly because John Healey was highly regarded in the MOD and within the armed forces, and with him in the Treasury, he knows what the issues are, and I'm sure that he will do his best to try to find the resources necessary to meet the huge number of commitments and many that aren't yet articulated. And you were talking earlier, I heard about sort of Ben McIntyre's worries about nuclear proliferation, all these sort of things. I mean, there's a hell of a lot coming our way, and we need to find the money to do a sensible minimum amount. And I think there's a difference between people's views on that at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, your former colleague, Lord Dannatt, the former Chief of the General Staff, the head of the Army, he pointed out that in a new Defence Secretary, Wes Streeting, this guy knew the square root of nothing about defence. I mean, other defence chiefs are much more optimistic. But do you share any concern that the new Wes Streeting as Defence Secretary is no expert on strategy or military matters?
Well, but he isn't an expert on military matters, there's no doubt about that. But I don't think that is historically necessarily a major constraint. Some of the best Secretaries of State for Defence were able to stand back from the sort of nitty-gritty on a day-to-day basis and draw strategic judgments. And it's the strategic level that we want our Secretary of State to focus on,
yes,
as indeed the National Security Council and the Prime Minister should too. There's lots of very good people within the MOD, whether servicemen and women or expert civil servants, who can provide the input to allow Wes Streeting to take the right sort of strategic decisions.
Right.
So personally, I'm not too worried about that, although I recognise why General Dannatt would say it. I'm not too worried. Sometimes, by the way, should quickly say, John, people who come into senior positions in defence, having been, for example, majors or captains in the armed forces, they come into defence with a major's or a captain's perspective, and it takes them quite a while to adjust to working at the strategic level.
Yeah, well, they can't all be field marshals, I guess, David. And you're not at all, concerned that one of the reasons John Healey was installed as Chancellor was to work and walk in lockstep with Andy Burnham and Number 10 Downing Street, with the idea, clearly from Number 10's point of view, that it might be a bit of a constraining influence.
Yeah, I'm sure that's so, but we've got to give the new government under Mr. Burnham at least fair wind at this stage, and I think we really could not have a better person from a defence point of view in the new Chancellor. But I like to think, and I know we've talked about this before, that I think strategically, and there is a balance to be struck. I mean, I would rather see the government come up with a proper defence policy, which would translate into a defence strategy. For example, at the moment, we're putting a lot of emphasis on Ukraine. That costs us a lot of money, money that could and should in due course hopefully go into our own armed forces. How do you adjust to that as it happens? And of course, there's many other examples. So thinking strategically, you also need to make sure the economy is prosperous.
Yes.
So you know, put too much money into one particular thing and the economy collapses, that's no good either. So I suppose my headline is, I trust John Healey to get this very complex thing right. And I will just emphasise that the Prime Minister and he and the other members of the National Security Council in particular need to think strategically and not get too early into the weeds of how they do anything in particular.
Right. A word on Iran. The Iran war is escalating. We now hear President Trump saying that if Iran attacks more shipping, America will start bombing bridges, nuclear sites, that sort of thing. Does that make you think maybe it's time for some second thoughts about allowing America to use British bases for airstrikes?
Well, I think one thing, the president's sort of rhetoric and the threats, which are all part of his modus operandi, as we now see regularly, I think that would be something I'd like to reserve judgment on at the moment until I knew more. I mean, what I would say is, whatever else, it's vital that we remain broadly in lockstep with the USA. I mean, NATO is utterly dependent and will be for many, many years on America. And we need to get that balanced right to make sure that in a sort of fit of peak, President Trump doesn't pull the plug on us.
Yes.
And if I may on that, John, I heard what Mr. Streeting said about developing our own industrial base and jobs and all that sort of thing. That is absolutely laudable. The problem is it's going to take a long, long time to get kit made in novel ways that haven't even been thought of potentially in Britain into the hands of soldiers, sailors and airmen. And I'm not certain that if you hear the rhetoric on what Russia might be doing, I don't necessarily accept it in 3 to 5 years' time. I'm afraid we have time to do that. So again, there's a balance to be struck.
All right. Field Marshal Lord Richards, thank you for joining me today.
Okay, thank you, John.